There's no time to stand on the bridge and clap for this one, we've got people to save! Or not. For Starfleet and the Federation, the Romulan evacuation was an unprecedented project, one that ended in utter disaster. For the Romulans and Remans, their homeworlds were reduced to ashes, as was the fleet that was intended to save them. Now, while we are still trying to wrap our brains around how this might have affected the entire multiverse, and also technically you can't prove the multiverse exists, so maybe it didn't affect it at all. Maybe it's continuing to affect it right now. Star Trek has never feared going there. Look at the alternative factor. Look at Mirror Mirror. This is going right back to Star Trek's earliest days. We've had transporters, we've had wormholes, we've even had black holes. Let's get Kelvin with it. This brand new timeline spanned 3 films, but that's not to say that the supernova didn't affect the prime timeline as well. It has affected, in fact, everything that has come from that explosion in our time in 2009. It's affected the 24th, 25th, and 32nd centuries. The only one that hasn't been affected right now is Lower Decks, as it's set in the years beforehand. Quite frankly, it is one of the watershed events in Star Trek history, and in fairness, put the star in Star Trek, didn't it?
With that in mind, I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are 10 ways the Romulan supernova impacted the multiverse.
Number 10. You're gonna need a biggest boat. Just how do you evacuate an entire planet, an entire civilization, when there's so much blood in the water? Very old enemies, lots of new ships, 900 million Romulans, 10,000 warp-capable ferries, Wallenberg class, probably several round trips, and only about 6 years advance warning. Now, if that isn't a great galactic logistical headache, I don't know what is. Now, that's going to give anyone pause for reflection, and the Federation itself needed that moment to pause before it committed to the 24th century equivalent of Operation Dynamo, to use Picard's historical allegory. Many felt there were better uses of our resources, said the Federation News Network representative interviewing him. As a direct consequence of the Romulan evacuation project and the destruction that the Valnakat living weapon had visited upon Starfleet, by 2384 Starfleet was just spread too thin, as Admiral Jellicoe tells Admiral Janeway in Ascension Part 1. Now, the Voyager A was out there, but they couldn't expect any reinforcements. What hope could the Romulans? Federation member worlds were being kept afloat by the A500 androids, and on Mars, the sharks were circling. Number 9. O for a ruse of fire. Mars was still burning in 2399, 15 years after the attack on First Contact Day. In 2385, the celebration stopped rather suddenly when the synthetics went rogue. Defense satellites turned inward, and synth ships started targeting from orbit all of the bases on the planet below. The Martian colonies were destroyed, Utopia Planitia was reduced to cinders, as were the 10,000 Wallenberg-class ships and all of the other ships in various stages of construction. Blood ran in all colours on the Red Planet. 92,143 lives were lost on the 5th of April, 2385. Fatal code error in the operating system. That was the official reason given for the A500's revolt. Now, there were those who begged to differ, those who were eventually vindicated even if it took a while. The synth attack was directly done by the Zhat Vash under the direction of Commodore O, who was a Romulan Vulcan spy deep within Federation security. By their Martian apocalypse, the Zhat Vash had effectively started a Ganmadan of their very own, condemning millions upon millions of their fellow Romulans to death. That didn't matter to them though, because it played directly into their plan to wipe out all synthetic life throughout the Milky Way galaxy. Number 8. Laws of no robotics. Though the term doesn't really best describe artificial life in Star Trek, and Data certainly didn't like it as a term, the A500s were effectively robots in their etymology, in that they were designed to live a life of servitude. Bound or not by the 3 laws of robotics, they certainly broke the first one. Asimov's dream of a positronic brain, to quote Tasha Yar, had become a nightmare. After the attack, and with no other automated services to back up an awful lot of Starfleet, all the resources that were there initially to save the Romulans suddenly vanished overnight. The Division of Advanced Synthetic Research at Daystrom Institute became a ghost town, and Bruce Maddox himself went into seclusion. We now know that he was working on his fractal twin project. That would have its own near doomsday event in the future. Millions, billions, or just one of the truly most devastating outcomes of the synth attack on Mars was the death of Riker and Troy's son, Thaddeus Riker. He contracted viral mendaxic neurosclerosis, which in his case was fatal because when Data was around, they could have cultured a cure on his positronic matrix. With all positronic matrices banned, there was no cure. Nepenthe, known for its healing properties, could only stay the inevitable. Number 7. Resigned to the swear jar. Catherine Janeway's plans of a beautiful garden had been scuppered before, and now her attempt at vine-ripened Talaxian tomatoes were put on ice as she was recalled to service in the wake of the attacks. While she may have chose to re-don her Starfleet uniform, another admiral made a very different choice. Admiral Picard demanded that the Romulan evacuation project be reinstated. When told that this was not possible, he offered his resignation, which was accepted. To be fair to Picard, he wasn't left with much of an alternative. He was up against all of Starfleet as he saw it. Now, he didn't know this, but Starfleet was in O's back pocket, and he couldn't replicate 10,000 ships out of his backside now, could he? Where he drops a little bit in our estimations is that in his own sheer f***ing hubris, he left others around him to pick up the pieces. Now, one of these people to be directly affected by this was Raffi Musiker. She reckoned straight away that there was outside interference. Her theory of a Romulan cabal working against the evacuation would eventually be proven correct. But in 2385, it saw her drummed out of the service and labelled a conspiracy theorist. This led to drug and alcohol addiction and removal from, effectively, society. Now, she did get some pretty good real estate out of the Vasquez Rocks until JL popped up back in her life again. The swear jar in that season was pretty full, but, I mean, in fairness, a sun goes supernova and all those people die? You bet your f***ing arse I'm gonna swear. Number 6. School's out for more than summer. If you want children to stop beating the absolute living tonkatsu out of each other, you just need to do one thing. Kill 92,141 plus 2 parents, people, on the same day. Now, I'm not going to lie, that was maybe a subtle message in Children of Mars, but bloody hell. But it was just after a fight between 2 students at a Starfleet boarding school that we first learned of the synth attack on Mars. When Admiral Janeway was at school, First Contact Day used to be a holiday. Now, presumably no longer, because classes did seem to be in full session in 2385, just before the attack began. Campus stood still to watch, and after that, classes were suspended indefinitely while Starfleet figured out what to do. It was reeling. There weren't even enough comm badges to go around, which is why you see the mix of the All Good Things era Future comm badge and, of course, the DS9 Voyager era comm badge as well. Combined with that, you also have 2 different styles of uniform, which we have seen before in the past and makes a little bit more sense now. All Starfleet operations were scaled back. Planetary exploration became a non-essential mission, and the Protostar class was reduced even to just 1. Now, hope does come in the darkest of times, and that came in the number 7, the amount of crew members aboard the USS Prodigy. School was no longer out, but it was out there. Number 5. Red Matter MacGuffin divides. Fandom can be a fickle thing, and to be fair, no follower is a saint. There are always discussions about the canonicity of the Kelvin films. You will have people defend them to the death, you will have people say that they are the worst thing that ever happened. You will have a lot of people who will say, I really just don't care. But there is one thing, that Romulan Supernova had multiversal impact. Obviously it did. Think of the title of this video. Leave it to Spock to come up with a way to save everyone. That unfortunately didn't work. He tried though, to be fair. The Red Matter MacGuffin that was introduced in Star Trek 09 was supposed to create a miniature singularity that would have absorbed the explosion of this supernova. It created a singularity, I'll give you that. The problem was that not the MacGuffin itself, but the MacGuffin didn't work in time. Single supernova, countless destinies changed, and 2 timelines for the price of 1 cinema ticket. It's called Kelvin for a reason. that beautiful ship that smashed straight into the face of the Narada. That happened in 2233 in this new timeline, saw the death of James T's dad and the birth of a new, beefier Starfleet. The knock-on effect from this is that Nero's then following attacks on Earth and Vulcan in 2258 bolstered the likes of Admiral Marcus. He, along with Section 31, started putting plans into effect for what they felt was the inevitable war with the Klingons. They also woke Khan up a bit early, and then we got Star Trek Into Darkness. Number 4. Temporal Cold Yore. In Star Trek, hopping across universes and time, while technically doable, is not very good for your health. Lieutenant Commander Yore, a time soldier, found that one out the hard way. The Romulan Supernova had now found its ice-cold reach in the 4th millennium. Though he died in agony, or was euthanized by his doctors, Yore did give us the first mention of the Kelvin timeline in the Prime Universe. A time soldier from the other timeline created by a temporal incursion by a Romulan mining ship, according to Dr. Kovich. The Betelgeusian in the early TNG era uniform had travelled from the Kelvin universe 2379 to some point after the ban on time travel thanks to the Temporal Accords. This is probably the 31st or 32nd century in the Prime universe. Now the problem was that his molecules didn't want to be there. More recently, Wesley Crusher mentioned the Narada when he met the crew of the Protostar in Prodigy's 2nd season. Now he does say, you're not supposed to know about that one, so shh. He'd probably been there too, though possibly without Yore's side effects, so there must be something different about the Travellers and their physiology that allows them to flip between universes. Number 3. The many deaths of Remis. In mythology, it was Romulus who founded Rome, but not before the murder of his brother Remis. In Star Trek, the Romulans didn't necessarily kill all the Remans, they just forced them to be slaves in dilithium mines. If the direct and most notable fallout of the Romulan supernova was the destruction of Romulus, then surely this would have meant the destruction of Remis as well. Long before any on-screen appearance, they languished in purgatory until they finally appeared in Star Trek Nemesis. They were apparently used as cannon fodder in the Dominion War until eventually a lone human clone bandied them together to rise up and overthrow, for a time, their Romulan masters. Now, they were remembered for a little bit in Star Trek Enterprise before falling back into obscurity, before being scraped off a torture chair in Star Trek Lower Decks. We'd all known the Romulan supernova was coming from 2009, but there was no mention of the Remans. It was Romulan supernova, Romulan evacuation. What happened to the Count Orlok-inspired Remans? Where were the Remans in the 32nd century? Number 2. Where the deer and the antelope play. The skies were always cloudy, though the cities equally bright, for anyone who dared to roam around the Romulan neutral zone. Established at the end of the Earth-Romulan War, this section of space stood for 2 centuries. The 2385 collapse of the star led to the rapid collapse of the Romulan Empire. There was no more need for demarcated neutrality, but there was no help from the Federation either, so it fell on the Fenris Rangers to police the area. After the supernova, and with no Starfleet to help, areas such as the Kiris sector fell into complete criminality, leading a fairly tough job for the Fenris Rangers to try and keep the peace. Romulan refugees spread out throughout the quadrant. Some remained on the reclamation planet of Vashti, which itself became a hotbed for the racist Romulan rebirth movement, while some made it as far as Earth. Elsewhere in the Beta Quadrant, the Romulan Free State formed, taking advantage of an abandoned Borg cube which they renamed the Artifact. Borg technology was quite the rage, as poor Icheb found out when he tried to help out some of his old crewmates' mates, and his eye wiped out for it. It's alright though, he's dead now. One plus side is that we did get Elnor, who grew up on Vashti under the watchful care of the Qowat Milat. He would go on to be the first full Romulan openly attending Starfleet Academy. Now that's a big step when you think that not that long before this, anyone with Romulan blood in their system had quite a struggle when it came to acceptance in Starfleet Academy. Number 1. 2 formerly known as Vulcan. There's never been an official number given to the population of Romulus, and, well, after the supernova, there's not going to be one. Star Trek Star Charts offers a hypothetical 18 billion, seems nice and small. Whatever the canon is, 900 million lives, like they talked about during the evacuation, does seem a little low. But when you think about it, that was probably just the number of Romulan citizens the Federation had to relocate. Billions in the Beta Quadrant were in the burst radius, but that's not to say that they weren't able to get away on their own ships. Now, I mean, if we listen to Spock in the movie, the supernova offered some sort of galactic destruction, which frankly just seems like hysterical nonsense from the well-known hysterical Spock. The real question is, how many Romulans died? Well, as it stands right now, we don't know. Sadly, what we do know with a bit more clarity is the amount of Vulcan lives that were lost thanks to Nero's black hole. That's about 6 billion. I am now a member of an endangered species, noted Spock. With no more than 10,000 Vulcans left alive, Spock Prime would go on to found a new Vulcan, which would become the capital of the Confederacy of Surak. He would live there until the end of his days in 2263. Back in the Prime universe, we know that Vulcans and Romulans survived into the 32nd century because in one of the centuries between that and the 24th, they had achieved Spock's dream of reunification. Vulcan was renamed Ni'Var. That term first appeared in the Star Trek fanzine Spockanalia in 1967. It means to form. If reunification were possible in the Kelvin universe, it would by definition have to work the other way round. With all that extra time, let's hope that the Kelvin universe was far better prepared for a supernova than the Prime universe was. Thank you very much everyone for watching along. You have been awesome. Thanks very much Jack Kiley, who put in all the work and the research for this article. You can find that over on whatculture.com. You legend. You are awesome, you're wonderful. Please follow me on the various socials. I'm at Sean Ferrick. We are at TrekCulture. Make sure that you're following us there. Please make sure you're subscribed. It makes all the difference. You are cool. You are brilliant. Live long and prosper. More so than Romulus did in the Prime universe. Thanks very much.